Once upon a time, I was working on a project where the code was a mess. The data access code was all over the place, it was confusing and hard to manage, and that's when I found the repository pattern, and it made everything so much easier. So now, let me show you what a repository is, why it is so helpful, and how to use it in your .NET applications. So let's make things simple and clean, and not use fat controllers anymore like that one. Now, as you can see here, we have a .NET Web API. So far, I've got a game, a character with a couple of properties, and then also a game, a context here. Because we're using Entity Framework, everything is already done for us. So in the end, we have a database with a table called game characters. And then we also already added our connection string. Code first migration is already used, as you can see here. So everything is prepared for us, so that in essence we could now use a fat controller to access the database and get our data, update stuff and so on. But now I want to use a repository. Now, what is a repository? Think of it as a middleman between your app and the database. It helps keep your code neat and in one place. And with a repository, you don't have to worry about the details of getting data from the database, for instance. It handles that for you. Sounds good? Then please sit down next to me and let's write some code together. And while you're doing that, could you please hit that like button and maybe even subscribe? That would be awesome. Thank you so much. Now, to be able to implement all CRUD operations, meaning create, read, update, and delete a game character, we should not use a controller. We should create a repository, and the first thing we need for that is an interface. So let's add a new folder here, call this thing repositories, like that, and then here add a new item, and this will be our game character repository. So the interface. Let's just think of it as a list of things our repository can do, right? We are saying in a minute that the repository can, for instance, get all characters, get a single character by its ID, delete a character, create one, and update one. So this could look like the following. We want to return a list of game characters at the reference here, and we call this get all characters, or just characters, whatever IntelliCode is telling us here. And by the way, I just want to mention, usually when I build applications, I make these methods asynchronous. So you could also name them get all characters async, for instance. But I wanted to try to keep this as simple as possible in this tutorial. So let's just use it like that. Next one would be returning a single character. IntelliCode is already suggesting get character by ID. This looks good to me. And then we have the add or create character method, the update character method, and delete. So this shouldn't return anything. For instance, we've got add character, and here we of course provide a complete character. And then here we've got update character. Here now we want to also provide a complete character, and the last one is delete a character. Well, here it makes more sense to just provide an ID. And by the way, regarding the update character method, we could also provide the ID. This is up to you in the end, but let's just continue and then you will see how this develops throughout building this application. So get all characters, get character by ID, add character, update a character, and delete a character. Now when this is done, let's add our implementation class to that interface. But first, let me remind you that the current sale of the .NET Web Academy is almost over. So if you want to become an expert in .NET and Blazor, check out the link in the video description to get 20% off on any course or plan, or just head over to .NETWebAcademy.com. Alright, so back to the Solution Explorer, and here in our repositories folder, we add a new item, and this is now our game character repository, and this thing implements of course now our beautiful interface. And the great thing is, as always with control and period, we see our suggestions here, or the suggestions of Visual Studio, and we can automatically implement that interface. So with that, we now see already we have our add character method, delete character, and so on. And this thing is grabbing everything from our interface, meaning from that contract or the list of things our repository can do. Now, still, of course, we have to implement some stuff manually. And the first thing we need is actually our game context. As you can see here again, we have the game context here. So this is our database context using Entity Framework. For more details, please write it down in the comments. Then I will create a separate Entity Framework and Code First Migration tutorial for you to totally understand that and dive really deep. All right. But let's just say with that game context, we are able to get our characters and do all kinds of stuff with them. Now here we are using dependency injection. Don't get confused by that. I've got another tutorial here. Just check out the info card, for instance. But first, let's just add this thing with private read-only, and then game context. And again, now we use control and period. And the beautiful stuff again is we can generate a constructor where our game context is automatically injected. And now we can cover all the other methods here. So the first one, let's move to get all characters. All right, so here, pretty simple actually. What we want to do is we want to return all the game characters. So context, game characters, and then to lists. All right, so with that we get all characters in our database or in our database table. Then we've got get character by ID. Now, how would we do that? Well, we can also directly return from our game context game characters. So this is our table, game characters table, and here we want to find a specific one with the given ID. Now this could be null, I know that. What we could do in this specific case, of course, just change the return type here. Then we would have to change that as well in the interface. So here now, let's add this question mark, and now this thing can be null, no warning anymore. Yep, now it's gone. And later in the controller, we can check, for instance, if the character is null and then return something else. All right, next would be add character. So here now we say game context, game characters, and then add character. All right, like that. But then with that, we made a change, or we want to make a change to our database. It is not done yet. Here now, first, or the last part, actually, the final thing we have to do is also save these changes. Because as you can see here with save changes async, the tooltip hopefully tells us what this thing does. There you see it saves all changes made in this context to the database. So with the add method here, as you can see now, it just begins tracking the given entity and any other reachable entities that are not already being tracked in the entity state, edit state, and so on. So with that, we are not actually adding the character to the database. We first have to save these changes. And this is the case every single time you change something in the database. So for instance, also with deleting a character or updating a character, we have to do that as well. Now, updating a character can be a bit more complex because here it depends what you want to update in the end. So the first step might be to get the character and looking for it by using game context game characters first, or default, for instance, where the character C ID equals the provided character ID. I know this is already a little bit complicated, and let's change the name here to character to update, for instance. So this is the character we want to update, and here now in this method we say we want to get the first character where the ID in the database of this character, the ID of this character in the database is the same as the provided ID. Now this thing is null, let's say. We just return. Otherwise, what we do is we can now decide ourselves which properties we want to update. So what we can do now is we just say character to update, and then for instance the health is the character health. Then we've got the name is now the character name. We've got other properties like the weapon. Then character to update a level is the character level. Character to update, what else do we have? Weapon, health, name, weapon, level. I think we also have special ability and the class. So when this is now done, there is an update method, but we don't have to call it. We already changed the properties. So now the last step we have to do is simply saving all the changes. So again, context or game context, save changes, And with that, we are done. All right, now the last method is deleting the character. And now here, again, var character is game context. Again, we could use first or default. I just wanted to show you the other option in the update method. Or again, we use find with the provided ID. And now let's do it the other way around. So if the character is not null, then we say game context, game characters. And here we say remove the character we just found. And then again, we made a change to the database. So let's save all the changes. So this is our repository. It does all the database work for us, getting or reading a character, adding or creating, updating and deleting characters. Again, notice how we use the game context here. That's our link to the database. And now let's see how we can use this repository in our controller. This is where it starts to get really helpful. So for the controller, remember, not a fat controller anymore. We right click our controllers folder, add a new controller, an API controller, please. And let's choose an empty one, the best way to learn in my opinion. And we call this thing now game character controller or game characters controller. This is up to you. Again, we're using dependency injection here, but this time instead of injecting the context, the game context, we are injecting our repository now. So here game character repository. Let's call this game character repository. Why not? And again, we can generate the constructor automatically and then just add our controller methods, our endpoints if you want. So the first one, maybe just get all the characters. Now here we say public action results get all characters like that. And now here we say var characters is game character repository get all characters. And then we return OK, which is the status code 200. And then we also return all our characters with that. All right, now the next method would be returning just one character by its ID. Again, if you're not familiar with the request methods, we're using get, post, put, and delete here. Tell me that in the comments. I am more than happy to create another tutorial for you, or check out the .NET Web Academy, because there we're going really deep with all that stuff. Anyways, here we also have to provide an ID. So let's add one here. Looks like that. So the route in the end is, as you can see here, API, then the controller name, which is the game character term here, and then the ID of the character. So here now we say public action results, and then maybe get character or get character by ID, int character ID or ID. Again, this is totally up to you. And here now we say var character is now our game character repository get character by ID with the character ID. And now pay attention here, if we say if the character is null, right, then we can react to that actually and return not a bad request, but actually a not found, like that. All right, and as you can see here, it returns a status 404 not found response. I just love that. And again, when you check out the method here, you see we added the question mark, so we're able to return null, right? So now I hope everything comes together. And if the character is not null, of course, we actually return it. All right, so this is getting all characters and getting a character by its ID. Now let's add a character next, which would be HTTP post, and then here public action result, add character, and here we provide an actual game character and not the controller, a game character. And here with the character, of course, we have to add the reference like that. And here now we say first we check if the provided character is null, then we return a bad request like that. Now this would be a 400, but otherwise we also have to close this function. And then we say game character repository add character and then character like that. And then we return not just OK, we say created at action name of get character by ID like that. And then with the new ID, which is the character ID, and the actual object is then our character like that. All right, we are almost done. Now we're using the put request method to update a character. So here now we say public I action results update character int ID, and then the game character. You see in the repository method, I already told you that we could add the ID separately. Now here we're using the complete game character, but the ID is provided with the endpoint. And this means that we also have to change the route. Similar to the get character by ID method, we also add the ID here. Again, first let's check if the character is null. If so, we return a bad request. And if not, we do the following. First, we check already if this character exists. Again, this is up to you because we're actually already doing that in the update method. So we have 2 round trips to the database. Maybe not the best way. Again, it's up to you, but I think it doesn't cost that much if you're doing it in the end. But if we do it here, we can just say that if the character is null, again, we return a not found, right? So here now we say game character repository gets character by ID with that provided ID like that. And then if the existing character is null, again, we return not found. And if that's not the case, then we say game character repository update character and then character, right? The provided character. And then here we return no content because we actually don't return anything. One more thing we could add here to make this a bit more secure. You see, we are only providing the character, the provided character to our repository. So this could be a different one, meaning a character with another ID. Now to avoid that error, we could just check here if the character ID is not the same as the provided ID. All right, so now we have to check if the request is actually fine and not a bad request. Then we check if the character actually exists. And if all that is true, everything's fine, then we update the character in the end. All right, so now the last one, which would be HTTP delete. And here we say public I action result delete character with the given ID. And again, we have to provide the route or the ID here in the route like that. And now regarding the body, similar to the update method, we first check if the character actually exists, the character with the provided ID. So here now we say var character is game character repository get character by ID ID. Now if the character is null, we again return not found. But otherwise, we say game character repository delete character with the ID and then return no content like that. So this is our controller. And if you're still thinking, why should I go through all this trouble? Well, here's why. By using a repository, your controller code stays clean and simple. You can easily test your controller because the data access code is separate. And the best part, because we use an interface like the iGame character repository interface, you can switch to a different database method without changing your controller code. Now, that's cool, right? Still, there's one very important part missing. We need to tell our application to use this new repository. We do this again with dependency injection, but don't worry, that's easy. For that, we just go to our program CS. Maybe you're already familiar with that. For instance, here you see different services we are already registering, like also the DB context. And now here for our game character repository, we can just say builder services, and then add scoped, for instance. And here we provide first the interface, game character repository, and then the implementation class game character repository. So by adding add scoped, we're telling .NET in the end to create a new game character repository each time it's needed. Now, we can use it anywhere in our application without creating an instance of it ourselves. So now it's time to run the application and test everything. Here we are, we see all our endpoints, which is really nice because now we can try to get all the characters. For instance, you see nothing there so far, but we can add a character, of course, with our new post endpoint. So here you already see an example, but let's just add a very nice character like this one. For instance, we hit execute and we see this is now the result. And when I now go back to getting all characters like this one here, we see now we have an array. You see that in with the brackets here. This is a list of characters and the first character is Link. Awesome. Now we could, for instance, also get a single character. So let me just close this endpoint and this one here. So this is the one for a single character. Let's try this with ID1, and I see here that I did a little mistake. I'm not sure why you didn't tell me that. You were sitting next to me, right? So here now we of course have to give this thing the same name so that the routes and the ID here match. So let's save that, restart the application again. There we are, and now we see that Swagger is also just suggesting or saying that we only need one ID. So let's add ID 1 here, like that. And now here we also get Link. Now we're also able to update Link, of course. So here now we try this out, add 1 for the ID. And of course I prepared something here. So now let me add this. So now Link gets a shield and another special ability, right? Instead of the spin attack, now we get the Triforce Slash. We hit execute. All right, no content, but what if we now again try to get all the characters? We see the shield and the Triforce Slash, and then last step would be trying to delete Link again. We try this out, add 1, execute. Let's just see. We execute this again and our list is empty. Now, I already mentioned dependency injection a couple of times, another crucial topic when developing apps with .NET, and to dive deep into that, just check out this video here on the screen.